Welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead, everybody. I appreciate you stopping by. We are here in the greenhouse because we've got a cold front coming through, or actually it came through, but the temperature is still dropping, and we may, just maybe, we'll get our first frost tonight, and we need to address a couple things. And really the truth of the matter is about how to get your garden basically through the frost, and what really matters in making your garden survive this frost, and that is if you have the correct plants planted. All right, so I got a lot of things in here for the night. We've got our onions that we've basically started from seed, and we're going to continue to grow these out in here, and they're doing pretty good. They definitely suffering from a little bit of lack of light, but for the most part everything's going good. I did bring a couple of my bonsai trees in here. Just as a side note, this is a crepe myrtle that I'm thickening up, and I don't really want it to go to sleep yet. That's why I want to keep it warm. And then this one over here is a trident maple. Same thing, I reshaped it this year, so I just want to keep it a little bit warm, not really stop the growing just yet. Got a more couple trays of seeds in here. These are all onions, and all of our lettuces and bok choys. We've got our mustards in the back. We've got some kale here. They're all doing good. And then we've got a solid row of radishes. Over here we've got our spinaches, which have definitely suffered from the heat. So we're going to reseed a couple of these later on today and just try and get them going, but everything is going good. Now here's the situation. All of these plants are frost hardy. They're not freeze proof, but they're frost hardy. They're pretty strong. The bok choy is the only thing that's pretty sensitive in here. Now I do have these big water tanks in the back that will release heat. They radiate the heat they absorb from the sun at night. So we are able to keep our greenhouse above about, I'd say about 4 or 5 degrees above the lows, as long as the sun comes out during the day and we do the appropriate things like shutting the greenhouse a little bit early to get those tanks to soak up enough heat. We can keep them warm. But let's pretend for right now that we don't have that. And actually out there I don't. So there's things that we can do, and I'm not talking about adding any heat. This is totally not adding any kind of electricity or heat or anything to it. But we want these plants to make it through a frost, especially when you're gonna have a small frost, maybe, and then for the next 10 days, you're not even gonna get close to it again. You don't wanna lose everything you've worked on when you're gonna get more grow time out of it. Now, since the sun's coming out, we're gonna go ahead and open our new louver window here and just go ahead and let this temperature regulate throughout the day. Got a pretty tender bed out here, and I wanna show you. And hopefully the wind won't get too bad. If it does get bad, I'm gonna run back in the greenhouse so you can hear me. But this bed behind me here, it's just got basically very small plants. Essentially what we have is the same things as in the greenhouse. We've got lettuce and radishes and stuff, but everything is real small and it's kind of tender right now. The bok choy is definitely, actually this is pak choy, is definitely a little bit more sensitive, I imagine. But these little seedlings right here, they're not really established well. So being that they're not established, they are a little bit sensitive, and we want to eliminate that. So what we're gonna do is I definitely put up my low tunnel frame here, and I'm gonna put my plastic over it, and that'll keep the frost off of it. But even though we're not supposed to get a hard frost, a light frost could do some damage, and it'll still get pretty cool. But if it does damage it, the thing is, with the greenhouse, then you have the low tunnels, plastic. Even if you come out and you just lay like a frost blanket over it or a towel or something, the key to everything is not necessarily keeping it from being frosty in the mornings, from the frost settling on it. It's about the recovery of it. This is super, super important. So this right here is a collard plant, and this is the hardiest of all the plants that we grow. It's a toss-up between our collards and our kale, which goes hand in hand. They can really take a pretty cold frost, and we really rely on these crops heavily. But when the cold comes, you'll come out in the morning and you'll see them frosted, and they're not going to look very healthy. As a matter of fact, they're going to look wilted, and they'll be obviously a little bit frozen. But the key is, and especially with these covers, is it gets the temperature warmer in the day. So even if, for instance, it does get cold enough, what happens is it doesn't let that cold damage the cells as long. And when the temperature rises inside of that cover, for instance, something like this, maybe you could put something in there, it's gonna rise really, really fast. I mean, if you step in here, and I don't have the door closed, but just in here, it's a good 10 degrees warmer in there. I can just feel it from my hand. So that allows it to warm the cells back up, release the water that's frozen, and limit the expansion that will help bust them. And then you're gonna be able to see the rebound in the plants. And a lot of times, like, you don't want to come out and you don't want to harvest when it's frozen. This plant's not really big enough to harvest right now, but if we did come out here, it would be bent over. It would be really hard, like literally hard. You don't want to come and cut it right then, but if you have a cover over this whole bed, then what happens is you'll be able to come out and you'll be able to harvest. The plant can recover. The soil won't get as cold, and if it does get cold, it'll warm it up faster, and then that'll allow it to be able, the roots to be able to take the nutrients faster and the water, and it won't damage the roots permanently. Now, I don't want you to think just because you've planted the right plants that they are impervious to the cold, because that is not the case. Everything that you plant does have damage from the cold, but it is able to tolerate that. So, I mean, it's really easy if you think about it. Like, I can reach in a fire and grab a hot poker and pull it out and drop it. I can tolerate that pain. It doesn't mean I want that pain. At least I don't. There's some people out there that do. But it's the same idea. These plants can tolerate it, but they don't want it. So we want to create an environment around them the next morning that allows them to come up in temperature faster. So for instance, last year we had that Arctic blast and it came through and it just froze everything. And I believe outside it was 15 degrees and in here it got to 27 degrees. Now we came back and most of the garden had been damaged, but when we came back and looked in here, we were gone at the time, everything had rebounded fine. And that's why we plant the same plants in here as we do out there, for two reasons. One, because I want to know how they're going to perform, and two, I want to know if they're going to do better out there or out there, and what in here, or what the limits are of them, because every plant has its own limit. And that's what we really need to understand, is what are the limits for them. So this year, the big chance that we're taking is this pak choi. Now the benefit of it is this pak choi seems to be growing pretty fast. So I would imagine in the next, I'd say if once we get through this cold night, or these 2 cold nights, we'll be able to come out here, and I'd say within the next 10 days we'll be able to start harvesting some of these plants. I mean, if you look at this is very small, but once we get I'd say 2 more shoots, that plant's going to be about at its maximum. And that's why we chose to grow this over bok choy, because it was a faster growing, smaller plant, which typically means it's quick to rebound. So we have another couple plants of these, and because these grew so fast, once we pull them out, we're probably just going to pluck them back, pop them right back into its place, and just keep growing until we run out of them. But you can see that all of these plants are really starting to do good. Now this kale is going to do just fine. No issues whatsoever. I would be safe to say that throughout this winter, providing we get enough sun in here, I don't have to do anything to protect this plant whatsoever. And that's why we don't ever plant collards in here. The sun is just beating me in my face, but the collards, we don't plant them in here because we've never ever had a collard plant die from the cold here, ever. As long as it's a healthy plant, they have always done well. The only reason why we put the kale in this year is because typically what will happen is it'll start to go dormant for a period, and we want to eliminate that dormancy period, so we put a couple plants in here to keep it going. Now the mustard, it as well doesn't do bad, but we put it in here because it continuously grows, and we found that out the first year. But we've got 3 plants in here, we've got 2 plants out there, and that's going to be more than enough for us to eat mustard throughout the whole winter. And they are actually starting to grow, and I put them by the vent here. So when it gets closer to spring, we can open this vent and it'll let that fresh air in and keep these plants here a little bit cooler. Won't be much, but it could be just enough to keep it. So we kind of planned that out accordingly. So you can see that we've really started to take all of these into account. But I want to stress one thing, if nothing else. Depending on where you live, I'm in zone 8A in North Carolina, so our winters aren't terribly cold, but we 100% are going to get freezing temperatures. As you can see, it's coming up and it's early November, and then with the rebound it can go either way. But you do not have to have a greenhouse in order to grow through the winter. What you need is the right plants and maybe a little bit of cover depending on where you are, and just knowing what the limits are for the plants. And then that way you can get them going and get them going the first route. So for our Brussels sprouts out there, we have not harvested any yet, they're not close, but this is also going to be like a one-time frost. It's not going to be a frost and then another one and then a couple days later. So I'm thinking we're about on time for that. But just remember, keep the temperature, keep them covered, let the temperatures rebound. If it's gonna stay cold in the day, just leave that cover on and make sure you vent something. You know, we have our automatic vents up here. We have a vent here. We have a door over here we can do. If we have the plastic, we'll just lift the plastic up about halfway, drape it over, let it vent out through the day because it'll get really hot in there. And your plants are going to recover from that frost, and you're not going to see as much damage over the period of time that you normally would. So protect them at night, but protect them in the morning and make sure that they get warmed up, and you will be amazed about how much better they grow during the cold season.